We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Welcome to Paring Down. I'm Shannon, and today I have with me in studio, aka the corner of my bedroom, my brother.
Do you have a fun a name for your followers or people that listen to the podcast, like the Paring Downers? Or
The Paring Downers sounds so depressing.
I know, or I don't know, but
Do you
I
have
just
any ideas?
I don't know. I was gonna say like Hey Downers, or
Hey, Downers. We're like a drug at this point.
Fresh off the beach with a fresh sunburn here.
I know, both of us. I put some makeup on mine, but you are a little redder than me because you don't have makeup on.
Exactly.
But anyways, most people are not watching on YouTube, but thank you for coming on the pod, bro. It's so fun to have another family member. Dad came on and now it's your turn.
I'm so happy that this worked out. I can't believe we're all here together before you move back to Alaska, and this is our last chance. So
we'll
we've
never
got
see each other again.
Yeah, the kids are running around outside. It's been wonderful.
If you hear little screams and like this weird kind of white noise situation going on, it's because my kids have never in their lives played in this particular corner of our backyard that butts up against the bedroom. But of course, today they decided that is where they need to be playing, right? The second while we're recording. And so that white noise is them turning on the hose outside and they're playing water balloons because, Florida weather.
Kids are being kids. They're having a great time. It's cousin time. It's perfect.
That's why you're in town. But also, so Jim is not from here in Florida. He lives up in Virginia with my sister-in-law and their two kiddos. Would you just give the peeps like a high-level introduction of who you are?
Sure. So my name is Jim Oliver. I live up in Virginia Beach. Obviously, the most important thing about me is that I am Shannon's brother. Yeah, I have a wife, two kids, and we're just settled down in Virginia Beach. I work for a talent agency booking speakers and entertainment for corporate events and colleges as they bring in folks, for their events, big speeches, athletes or celebrities or those types of folks.
Right.
Able to do that in Virginia Beach and absolutely love it. I'm not that interesting. I'm just happy to be here.
Oh, shut it. You're the coolest person I know. So Jim has always been the golden child and you will get the vibe today. What was the thing? The Riz? He was teaching me what I don't have, which is I don't have the Riz. I don't have the cool factor.
Stop. Even the way you're saying the Riz right now is the
incorrect.
least amount of Riz that you could possibly have. I think, Riz wants to delete itself, I think.
The Riz wishes it had never been invented because I said it. No, anyways, Jim is like my favorite human alive. And I'm so honored to have him today. And I wanted him on the podcast for two reasons. One, I just wanted to introduce the people to you. I feel like part of my duty to the world is if I know someone cool, I want to introduce them to my listeners so they can, garner the joy of knowing that you exist in the world. And I think you also have a really interesting perspective on intentionality and self-improvement, which a lot of this podcast touches on. And so I thought it just made sense to have you come in here and record with me today. So we're going to kind of do a little two-parter type of an episode. The first little bit, I want to talk more on a personal level with you about kind of what we went through when we lost our mom and how that has led to both of us, I think, being more intentional in the way that we live. And then I want to talk to you about your job. I think people will find it really interesting, just the kinds of folks you're exposed to in the celebrity world. But specifically, these are people who are kind of motivational speakers. They're out there giving the advice, doing the self-improvement. We're talking, am I allowed to name drop?
Sure.
Okay, so we're talking like the Mel Robbins of the world. We're talking Tim Tebow. We're talking Matthew McConaughey.
One time.
One time, Matthew McConaughey. My personal favorite was Steve, the original Steve from Blue's Clues. I was big fan of that one. Who are some of the other ones we were even talking about in the car today that I asked? Oh, you've pitched Brene Brown, but she's not available, right? She's like too busy.
Oh, these are all folks that are on the speaking circuit. Yeah, like Brene, Mel Robbins, Jay Shetty, those types we were talking about. Big on the corporate speaking circuit, obviously very, very busy. They all have best-selling books, wonderful people, a lot of great things to say. And it's companies like ours that helps bring them to various events. So we don't represent them. We work with the buyers and help bring these folks to fun events all over the country.
Right. So a college wants somebody to give a keynote, a speech, or some, I don't know, like you mentioned, junior leagues, or there's big conferences, corporate conferences, and they want a big fun name to come in and give a motivational speech. And so Jim works with these people and their teams to get them there. And so that's a really interesting job, just kind of what he's exposed to. So we're going to talk a little bit about my brother's advice when it comes to how we're discerning in terms of the self-improvement or, just general advice that we get out in the world, because he knows firsthand, and it's not dogging anybody. This isn't going to be like a bashing episode by any means, and certainly not by name or anything, but it's really going to be, how do we interpret what we receive as advice into our lives to make sure that it's actually benefiting us, and we're not just like putting people on a pedestal and being like, okay, whatever they say is absolute truth. You know what I mean? And I think that it's going to be really interesting to hear from you what your opinion on all of that looks like as somebody who's actively in that world. But let's start with some of kind of the more personal stuff. So Jim's kids, by the way, are the exact same age as mine, my older kids. So our first kids are 2 months apart.
2 months apart, exactly. And then our middle kids are 1 month apart. So we've lived the same life.
It's bizarre. So we all just have the kind of a life we're so grateful for, that we're in the same stage of life as people we really get along with that happen to be family. My sister-in-law was my matron of honor. And like I mentioned, Jim is my best friend. Not growing up. I mean, we were besties growing up, but also tried to murder each other, I would say.
Oh, I joke that the further apart we are, the better friends we are. And the longer...
Not in adult life.
No, well, I mean, the longer we stay under one roof. I've been staying with you here for 3 days.
How are you feeling?
So far, so good. Although another couple days and you might be kicking me out, I think.
That's not true.
So
that's not true. But no, we fought like cats and dogs in middle and high school. But anyways, I wanted to kind of paint that picture of our lives and our friendship now, because Jim and I are extremely close. And I would attribute that to multiple things, but one of them is probably losing mom when we did. I mean, we always really cared about each other, but we were both living in New York City, and mom was diagnosed with bladder cancer. How did you find out?
Mom called me. I was working at a comedy club in Queens actually at the time, and I remember getting a phone call from mom, and it was one of those, got something important to tell you. But honestly, it kind of came out of the blue for me. And I think it kind of came out of the blue for everybody, including mom. I don't think she even really knew. And it was just immediate, hey, it's stage 4 bladder cancer. We're going to try some treatments, but it's pretty far along. Exactly. So I remember vividly being on the streets in Queens outside the comedy club that I was working at the time, not doing stand-up comedy, just running the bar and managing the space. But it was that, vividly remember that.
Me too. I was on the streets of New York. So we were both living in New York City at the time. We were both in entertainment in different ways. I was pursuing Broadway. Jim had begun his career, which led into kind of working as, he started going towards like being an agent, like a talent agent. And he started in comedy and then switched over to booking. What is your official title now?
Agent. Still. Agent. Yes. Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we were up in New York for different reasons, but we were both there. And I remember going to like a birthday dinner, and I was on the Lower East Side going into some restaurant, and I was out on the street and took the phone call from mom when she told me to. And I obviously immediately did not go to dinner. I went straight to your apartment and waited for you to get home. And Lindsay met me there, your wife. And so anyways, that was obviously a turning point in our lives. Our mom was very healthy. Do you want to give the people like a picture of mom?
Yeah. I mean, so she was a marathon runner, triathlete, biked everywhere. She was in cardiac rehab for a long time. So
as a nurse,
basically anybody who had heart attacks and they were recovering, mom was the person who was helping them recover. So there's a lot of physical therapy involved in that. And then she went into diabetes education kind of as a second portion of her career, really focusing on nutrition. So she really focused on health and wellness throughout her entire life. She was a kinesiology major in college.
This to happen was very odd.
Yeah.
She was just in such good health, and everyone on her side of the family and my dad's had lived into like their 90s, you know? And so this came out of the blue that she just had a symptom one day, went to the doctor because she was an RN and knew she should go to the doctor, and there was nothing she could have done about it. And so I think that's an important piece to this story, because often when you go through grief, and it's easier to try and point to a why somebody passed away, to wrap your head around it, right? It just makes it a little easier. Like if someone it doesn't make it easier in terms of grief. We will miss anybody no matter what they did. If someone that could have smoked pack a day, they get lung cancer, it doesn't mean that we're not grieving their life as much, but it's a little easier when you can point to a why that happened to someone. And with mom, there's been no ability to pinpoint why. There was no lifestyle choice that was unhealthy. The way that she operated she was just like a very healthy human. I don't even know how to put it. Like she was spiritually healthy. She had a great relationship with God. She would go on those 7-mile runs every morning. She'd swim a mile after work in the afternoon. She had a glass of wine occasionally. She would just go out and enjoy the kayak out in the backyard. We lived on like an inlet, and she would go out there. So anyways, I think because of that, I know that affected my life moving forward because I was never given a why.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that changed how I live, because I became more intentional, where I now make a very concerted effort to minimize danger anywhere I can, because I'm like, it could happen to me. Like because it happened to mom, it could happen to anyone. So I'm going to try and feed me and my kids as healthy as I can, or I'm going to research everything that I can when it comes to health and safety to keep us as safe and healthy as possible, because I don't feel like I'm invincible. I know I'm not invincible. But you've had a little bit of a different reaction when it comes to how you've started to live intentionally that we've had great conversations about. So can you share with everyone your take on it?
Well, sure. So it's almost tough to even think about where to begin, but there's a few different pieces to the question you just asked. One is the grieving element, and one is how we see and deal with kind of like risk assessment and risk management in your own life, specifically around whether things like your health or whatever. In terms of grieving, I think when mom passed away, I definitely had more of, let's celebrate her life, and let's honor her by doing the things that she loved to do. So she was a big runner, so we run a lot of 5Ks. In fact, I have another half marathon coming up here in 2 weeks, and that was a habit that started when mom passed away, as a way of honoring her, remembering her. And so in terms of kind of keeping her memory alive, I think it was by doing the things she loved to do, by participating in her life in that way. So that was the grieving element for me. But I do think that in terms of how we approach safety issues, right? I actually have I do have a different perspective on this. I think for me, it wasn't so much, okay, we're not invincible, we need to be safe. It's that things are going to happen, and and you can't control it. And because it's outside of your control, actually opening up, almost having a little bit more of an open-handed approach, not being totally, I'm not saying being reckless and negligent, but just understanding that something's going to get you. You know what I mean? When it's your time, it's going to be your time. And so dwelling on it and trying to overcorrect, I think sometimes gives you a sense of control, or you're trying to achieve a sense of control that is impossible to have.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of living in the moment and being able to enjoy, you're so busy trying to tightly hold on to something you can't control, whether, you can control around the margins, but like, you can control in a big way, right? Eat healthy. And,
put on a kind of seatbelt.
Right. Those types of things. But you can't always control everything that's going to happen. So I do think that having a little bit more of an open-handed approach was healthy for me.
Right.
And it was actually granted me a lot of freedom from having to worry about the intricacies of every element of safety at all times.
Right. And I think it was really interesting for us to realize what different mindsets and approaches we took. And I can see how the approach you take can be really healthy. Like, I think you live in the moment more easily without fear and anxiety over the worst case scenario. We both look at it the same way. We know that we're not invincible. And so then you broke off from that and said, because we're not invincible, let's live every moment without fear, because we can do our best. But at the end of the day, let's just enjoy ourselves, because something's going to get you. So might as well be out there enjoying yourselves. And then I look at it and say, we're not invincible. Therefore, we need to be more careful. And I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong, but I really appreciated when I learned that from you, because it helps me realize that I do tend to try and hold on to too much control when it comes to, you know, our lives or even my kids' lives. And again, it's not recklessness. You are obviously a wonderful dad, but I just thought that was an interesting diversion, if that's the right word. We went in different directions with our intentionality in life.
Can I use an example? Can I trigger
Are
you?
you going to make fun of me?
Can I trigger you a little bit? So a perfect example of this is, speaking of decluttering, like things that I don't even know if Shannon has this in her house. This may have been decluttered. But Shannon introduced me to the idea of a de-choker for our kids when your kids are really little. If you haven't heard of this, it's part of what I call the baby industrial complex that is just basically set up to have moms who are so worried about every little thing. Hey, listen, we have an item and a thing that you can buy to make you feel like you're a good mom by having this. The de-choker is the perfect example. So a de-choker is this item that apparently if your baby is choking, you can get it, and it like you put it on your baby's face, and you can like try to suck out whatever your baby is choking on and save your baby. I mean, in theory, this sounds great. It all breaks down the second you begin to think about this in practice, because God forbid your child begins.
Well, this happened to you.
Yeah, God forbid your child begins choking. This is not what happens. You don't say, "Oh, honey, where's that de-choker we bought that one time that we now have in some sort of drawer around our house? We need to go find it." And while your kid is choking, you are running around the house trying to find the de-choker. And then you've never used it before. So what are you're going to try to, I got to try to fit it on the mouth. It's not like you practice with the de-choker. And so like, no, that's ridiculous. You're never going to use it. What happens is you turn your kid around and you give them the Heimlich and until they spit it up. It's just, you're acting in the moment. The de-choker is something that is a perfect example of somebody preying on a legitimate fear, which is your child choking, but it is not practical. What's practical is doing it the way that we've always done it. If it's a small baby, you turn the baby over, you pat it on the back. You know, if it's a bigger child, you get behind, you do the Heimlich. These are the time-tested ways of doing this.
Jim, you know, I can tell you're not a professional podcaster, because someone is going to email me and be like, the de-choker saved my child's life.
You're right.
And therefore, no, I'm kidding. No, but it's true. I 100% agree with you, especially in retrospect, you know, that is, I mean, gosh, we can go on the clutter route with this conversation, and we can go on the fear route, just like consumerism, trying to get you to buy stuff, you know, for money making.
They're connected.
They go hand in hand, of course. But like, yes, that is a very good point. And I for sure bought too much baby stuff when I was a new mom. In fact, I literally have now, I don't know if I've ever even told the people on the podcast, but I do have a baby essentials list so that you don't go overboard buying all the stuff you don't actually need for your baby. And whatever you need to do to feel safe with your child, I'm 100% on board. But you're right. That's a great example of you being like, I don't need to go the extra mile for something that is not actually going to be helpful. Like you're like, if it happens, it happens, and I will take care of it in the moment. I know how to do the Heimlich or whatever. Meanwhile, I'm like doomsday planning. Let me get a de-choker and put it. I need to get 3 so that they're accessible in each room. And that was more of my approach to life. Not as much anymore. I will say I've let a lot of that go.
Yeah, but but you know, and just because it's decluttering thing, I think a lot of these products are marketed to your fear, to legitimate fears. I mean, these are 100% legitimate fears. Right. And it's a fear that every parent viscerally has. So these products are made in order to help assuage those fears.
And it goes beyond just like a baby, keep your baby alive. It moves into, my fear that my child's going to fall behind in school, my fear that,
100%.
Right. So they have all these educational toys. And at the end of the day, you can teach your kids colors and counting and all of that stuff by doing laundry together. Can you put all the pink socks in a pile? And so I've definitely learned that too, that when it comes to kid clutter, so much of it, like you said, preys on our fears, which for someone like me, whose first reaction to losing mom was so much fear. How do I prevent this from happening to me and my loved ones again? And I'm not alone. There's so many of us that in the wake of our grief, consumerism swoops in to then to kind of clutter up our lives and take our money, when in reality it's not going to do anything that great for us.
But it's hard because you do have those fears. But I think that's what we're kind of talking about here, which is the intentional relinquishing of the control. You know, if you're consistently dwelling on the worst possible thing that can happen at all times, you're going to be in a heightened state of agitation, all the time. And that's a tough way to live. It's not impossible to live that way, but it is a tough way to live.
And it's easier said than done, because I do think some of it is personality, right?
Sure,
like,
of course.
If you believe in the Enneagram, I mean, you're a 7, right?
Yes.
We've talked about this, like through and through, just like here for a good time. Here not for a long time.
Not for a long time. Obviously, exactly.
And then there's me. I'm what you've identified me as a 4, which is the most accurate thing, because I couldn't, for years, I read books on the Enneagram. I was like, I don't have a number. I'm the only one on the planet. And Jim was like, it's okay. So that means you're a 4, because obviously 4s
always think they're the only ones on the planet going through whatever they're going through. That's exactly
wrong.
Right.
It's not wrong.
Classic 4.
Classic 4. But anyways, okay. So I'm also curious though. So we talked about how our intentional lives we've gone in different directions with intentionality. And I do want to say, I don't think I'm in a super unhealthy place anymore when it comes to my overthinking and anxiety. I definitely think about it more than you do still. And I definitely take the approach that because it can happen to anyone, I'm going to try and stay as safe as possible, right? Like I know a car could crash into us at any moment. So you better believe my kids are going to be in rear facing as long as humanly possible. And that's not to say that someone whose kids don't stay in rear facing as long as humanly possible are bad parents. It's a different perspective of what they believe to be the most important thing in an intentional life for them. So we talked about our differences there, but I'm also curious, how did losing mom so young shift your perspective on what really matters in life?
Oh, well, it fundamentally shifted how I operate through life. So actually helped me to really wrestle with the concept of death, not to get like way too dark on this podcast.
That's fine.
But it's not. This is dark. This is like
super weird.
I feel hopefully it's a light way to talk about a dark topic, because we actually don't talk about death enough in our culture.
100%.
We are afraid of it. It's a very taboo kind of subject. And so we don't really wrestle with the concept.
But it makes people fear it more when you don't talk about it. Like it does make you, it has for me, because I have faced death head on with mom. And I do think about my mortality way more often, as we've established. But it makes you think about right now. You don't want to have regrets when you die. You don't go about on autopilot, not really thinking about death, wanting to push it out of your mind. But then that makes you not live a life that you're going to look back and feel good about, because you're not thinking about the fact that you have a finite amount of time. So have you found that to be true with you? Like, what do you prioritize now? Or what have you decided really matters, that maybe when you were living before mom died in your early 20s, more laissez-faire, that you're like, oh, wow, like I want to make sure I'm living more intentionally about this is more important to me than ever.
It's the basics that everybody talks about.
Yeah.
It's your family. It's how you interact with the world. Like, so I would say work, but work is just a manifestation of how you interact with the world. It doesn't have to be work, but it has to be how are you meaningfully contributing to society, right? That doesn't have to be through paid work. That can be through being a mother. But like, in what ways are you contributing to your family? In what ways are you contributing to your community? This I'm not making any of this up. This is wisdom as old as time,
right?
But it is true, and we forget about it because we go on autopilot in our life. And in fact, I get the most cluttered in my life when I am on kind of a little bit more of like, I'm just trying to get through it. Suddenly, where did all this stuff come from?
Right. And that's physical and otherwise. That's your schedule. That's
100%.
Your friendships. I think I'm a pretty intentional person. Obviously, this is like my whole job, like talking about it, right? But we have to be really intentional, not only with what we keep in our homes, but what we keep in our schedules, who we keep in our lives, all of that. And when you face death more head on without being afraid of it, it really puts into perspective making the most. And I don't mean make the most out of life, like live on a productivity hamster wheel. I just mean make the most out of life. Like you want to look back and be like, yes, I spent time with the best people. The fact that you and Linz and the kids flew out here to see us means so much to me, right? Like this is what life is about, is spending time with the people you love.
And you feel like you're in the driver's seat of your own life. I mean, you're not just a passenger of your own life. It is so important to have some agency and to feel that you are kind of pointing. You don't have full control, but at least you can like try to point the ship in the right direction,
100%. I really appreciate you sharing so much of like what we've personally been through and how that kind of has changed your perspective. I just look up to you so much, especially the way you and Linz operate as a team with your intentionality and your parenthood with your angelic children. Paring down, listeners know that my kids are off their little rockers. Love them, off the rockers. My niece and nephew are not off their rockers. And Lindsay and Jim get mad at me when I say this because they're like, no, they're not perfect. I'm like, I know they're not perfect, but they're perfect. Okay. They actually are. Like they were in a disagreement. My niece and nephew, we were in the driveway yesterday and they were like arguing over who got to ride the Power Wheel. And it was like a silent argument. It was like, I had to really pay attention to know that they were mad at each other. And Lindsay was like calmly helping them figure it out. I'm like, you don't have to pay attention to know if my kids are mad at each other. You know what I mean? Like you and the whole neighborhood will be aware of what's going on. So anyways, you and Lindsay are doing something very right. Also, as always in our lives, God loves you a little bit more. Oh. I'm kidding.
Come on now.
I'm kidding. Okay, let's get to your job because it's so fun. It's the coolest job. So as Jim said, he books speakers for speaking gigs and has worked with some of the biggest names in the industry. My first question is, what is my first question? Anytime you tell me who you've worked with.
How much do they cost?
No, that's not my first question. It's always, are they nice?
Are they nice? That is true. My first question is always, how much do they cost?
Right, that's your job.
But yeah, no, you always say, are they nice? And I say, yes, they are almost always lovely people for the most part.
When you were booking Alonamar, I literally told Jim, I was like, you need to tell me when this is happening. I will get on a plane and pretend to be your assistant just so I can be in the same room as her. Please, I will do it.
She's very busy. She was not available to take.
I know. She went on the Dancing with the Stars tour.
Yeah, to take our offer. But
I know. Okay. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for me. Let me be clear. I don't care about you getting the gig or not. I'm sorry for me not getting to go with you. Anyway, all that to be said is that I know you kind of joke that you're just on the business side of it, which you are. Like when you're interacting with these big names, it's mostly with their agents. But when you do interact with them, it is on a professional level.
Absolutely.
You're logistically telling them where they need to be, what time, what the expectation is. And then if you're at the event, you're kind of help moving things along to make sure they get their butts on that stage, because otherwise your buyer will be mad at you.
Basically.
And so I get that, but you do interact with them enough. And sometimes you do get to hang out with them. But with working with some of the biggest names in the speaking world, what have you noticed you get to listen to their speeches and you have a front row seat with, how they prepare and all of that stuff. So you've heard all of the best advice in the world. What have you noticed about the advice that resonates most with the audience?
Many motivational speakers are actually saying the same thing.
Right.
In different ways. And what resonates with the audience is it actually comes back to like that driver's seat analogy that I just made about, kind of being in the driver's seat of your own life. Most motivational speakers have different ways of approaching this, but the idea is that you have agency in your life. You have power. You do not have to sit back and let life happen to you. You can happen to life. And they all say it in different ways,
right,
with different examples and for different types of people and different types of experiences. But fundamentally, a motivational talk is about empowering the audience to take control of their own life and go out and improve themselves in one way, whether it's professionally, whether it's personally. And that's the point of a motivational talk. And so the people who can do that really well are in high demand, because we all want to know, how can we move one step forward in our life? So the best motivational speakers are the ones who, when you leave, you say, I know the next step I'm going to take. And it's something that's practical. So that's kind of the gist of what they're trying to do. And they all have different, obviously, ways of doing it, but fundamentally, there's a lot of similarities in it.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. I mean, and it's true. It's that sense of agency that gets us excited to get out there and do something, right? You're being motivated to do something. How can we apply the wisdom? We're going to get into the discernment, because I think that is really important as we're discerning who we're taking wisdom from. But first, because you shared about this general idea of self-agency being the goal here, how can we apply that wisdom of these thought leaders in a way that actually fits our lives, rather than just being inspired in the moment and then you walk away and you're like, oh my gosh, that was so motivating, but then we go back to life as it is? Do you have any, from being exposed to it so much, like, would you be able to say that there's a way we can apply this in a more practical way?
You're going to have to apply it to yourself. Their experience is not your experience. In fact, nobody else's experience is your experience. So whatever you hear, only you are going to be able to figure out how to apply what you're hearing. When you go to that keynote speech session for your job, you're going to get a lot of great nuggets of wisdom. But it really is up to you to figure out how that's going to apply to your life. And because at the end of the day, they're not going to do it for you. And actually, at the end of the day, their experience, they're going to, a lot of speakers, they'll share a lot of their own personal experiences, which are incredible and amazing, but also their personal experiences are more like guideposts pointing you in the right direction. They're trying to point you towards something, because their experience is never going to be your experience.
Right. Especially when you're booking, gosh, who are the ones you were saying? Like the first female fighter pilot?
Yeah, sure. Exactly. Like, incredible speaker, and such an inspiring story. The first female F-14 fighter pilot. Wow. Or the person who, climbed this wonderful mountain, or the person who swam from here to Cuba. It's like, these are incredible stories. And you don't need to be that person to create meaningful change in your life. And their stories can inspire you, but you need to take that inspiration and think, what's my next step? And I always come back to next steps. You're not going to climb the mountain tomorrow. The best motivational speech I've ever heard
tell me.
is from Frozen 2. In the least popular scene from the entire movie, the one that kids are like, I don't even remember this scene. It's when Anna is in the cave. Elsa has gone off and frozen herself. And Anna now loses Olaf. And she is literally in a deep, dark, dank cave, alone and despondent and in complete despair. And she sings a song, and it's called The Next Right Thing. I just need to do the next right thing. And that fundamentally is, I always thought, I was like, that's the greatest song in Disney. And it's the most applicable and useful philosophy, because when you don't know what to do next, you just need to look right ahead of you and do the next right thing. And as you're listening to motivational speakers, or you're listening to these folks, sometimes it's easy, you want to look at the mountaintop, and that's not necessarily realistic. What you need to look at is right in front of you. What is the next right thing? And then after that, the next right thing. And eventually you climb your way out of the cave.
So, Jim, I have a proposition. I think you need to be a motivational speaker, and your shtick will be the next right thing. But you need to credit. You need to credit Anna. Let's not pull a Mel Robbins here and not credit Cassie Phillips for the entirety of her idea. But I want you to be the next right thing speaker, and then I also would like you to sing that song at the end of your speech, because what you guys don't know is that my brother has the best singing voice of any human alive. He and I grew up singing together. He plays piano. And we just love to sing our little show tunes together. But he's really, 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 really good. So I would like you to then sing the song.
I will make no promises, but
that sounds great. That does make sense. The next right thing.
And it's also simple. And I think it applies to
anything.
Your work in decluttering, because the concept is so simple. It is very simple. It's like, don't add all of the other bells and whistles. Just literally look, what is the thing I can do right now? Right now, can I do the dishes? Yes, I can do that. That is the next right thing. It can be like literally that small, but you have to, and it's that small of steps that again get you out of the cave.
Overwhelming. Right. And even when it comes to the decluttering process. So that's like the tidying process, which is a form of decluttering.
Sure.
But I was also thinking, wow, that's so true when it comes to the next right thing when it comes to decluttering. We don't have to overhaul our closet all in one day. Just do the next right thing. You see a sweater that you never wear anymore, just grab it and put it in the donation bin. Or something that your kid has grown out of that you're folding, you grab it and put it, instead of putting it back in the drawer, the next right thing, put it in the donation bin. It's the little things at a time. And yes, there are some cases where you need to do like these bigger projects. But like you said, it really is what's the next thing in front of us, because then we don't get overwhelmed and just not make any progress.
Paralyzed by indecision. When you say, I need to have I want my life to be perfect. It's like, well, that'll never happen. But whatever that is for you, that is such a big idea that it is paralyzing. You know, it's like, it's almost impossible to conceive of how you will ever get there.
Right.
It's very easy to conceive of how you can just take care of this one little thing right here, and then the next little thing after that, and almost don't even think about the big picture. But in a few months, suddenly your life has changed.
100%. It reminds me of, I remember that I wanted to put my kids' handprints. We do it on the tree skirt every year for the Christmas tree. And it was like mid-January. Our tree skirt wasn't put away yet because it was just sitting on our counter because I hadn't put the kids' handprints on it. It takes 5 minutes at most. You put their hands in green paint, and you put it on the tree skirt. But I just like had this big hang up in my head. I couldn't get it done. And so one day I was like, what's the first step? I need to go get a paper plate that I'm going to put the paint on. And I need to go get the paint out of our like paint crate. And so I didn't do their handprints that day, but I went and got a paper plate and I got the paint and I put it next to the tree skirt. You want to know when that was done? The next day. Because the next right thing was to go get that darn paper plate. We have to break it down into the smallest of next steps to make anything happen. I do want to get your take on, you had mentioned that most of these people are super nice, like you said, and they're all kind of saying the same thing, which is a good thing for them to say. But you said you don't have to be the person that can swim from here to Cuba. You don't have to be the first fighter pilot. And I think that's the beauty of these speeches. But I do know that some people get a really sour taste in their mouth. I'm going to use a very specific example, but like, you remember when Rachel Hollis and Dave Hollis got a divorce and everyone was really mad at them because they're like, you're snake oil salesmen because they always talked about marriage and how to have a great marriage. And now they're getting a divorce and people felt personally like gypped and duped by them. I think you and I had a similar take on that. But how do you feel when people hold these speakers to a really high standard in their lives based on what they're saying, like practice what you preach kind of a thing? What's your take?
My take is that as a culture, we tend to idolize people and we look up to people. So when they fall short of the ideals that they are espousing, we feel crushed because we feel like we know them. And you know what I mean? But the reality is that we don't know any of these people. And I think that some of the people with the best ideas are not necessarily the best people. And that's, by the way, something that has been true of all of human history. So the important thing is not necessarily to idolize the individual or to look up to the individual. It's to focus in on the ideas that are resonating with you and and how those ideas can be applied to your life, not so much how perfect that person is, because if you get too attached to a single person and not their ideas, you will end up getting disappointed in one way or another.
Yes. That was my take exactly. I was like, okay, yes, I think that Rachel Hollis and others have been very cringy. Rachel's a different story because she's definitely been problematic in other ways, but I'm just taking it only from the marriage issue when they got divorced. That's the only thing I'm touching on.
Her books were people, they were really helpful for a lot of people.
They were really, that's what I was going to say, is that a lot of what advice they gave about marriage was really sound, was really good. Some of it problematic, but like generally speaking, I think people can not be practicing what they preach, but that doesn't mean that what they're preaching isn't helpful. And I think that that's an important, I love that you say that, like get more attached to the ideas of how this is going to work in my life, not are they doing it perfectly. And I can only see change in my life if I'm like trying to become that person. That's never going to work. Even in my field, it's very frustrating. People are super mean a lot of times. And I will get DMs being like, why would I ever follow you? I'm like, first of all, I never asked you to follow me. Welcome to my DMs. You DM'd me, but okay. But they will say like, oh, your house is cluttered. Or, like, how can you run a decluttering account, but you still do X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, even if you think I am not as decluttered and minimalist as a perfect minimalist should be, which I've never claimed to be, by the way, is what I'm saying still helpful? Even if my house was full of stuff right now, like cluttered to the brim, what I'm sharing, I think is very helpful, that I'm trying to help people choose what is most important to them and keep only that, and not be stressed by the amount of stuff in their house that's keeping them from doing the things that matter to them, from enjoying the things they own that are actually important to them, being drowned out by all of the clutter and the mess. And it can actually help your life. Does it matter if I am perfectly decluttered? If I'm sharing a message that is helping you in some way, I don't think it really matters. Now, of course, we want to be people of integrity. So of course I do live my life with as much integrity as possible. That's really, really important to me. But I do think that there's a fine line of listening to advice and, like you said, taking it in for the idea that it is, versus idolizing the person and expecting perfection from the person saying it.
And also there's just a definitional problem. You just said perfectly decluttered. Well, perfectly decluttered is going to mean something different to different people. Yes. So that's why I say take the ideas and then apply them to you. Don't try to be. Instagram is a challenge because what Instagram is so visual, right? TikTok, it's very visual. It makes you want to be that person, right? You want to be the influencer. You want to be just like them, which I get it. There's a motivational quality to it. There's an inspirational quality, but you will never be that person. So there's at some point you do need to think about it more conceptually and how these ideas can fit into your life. Like for some minimalists, it might truly just mean like you have a desk and a bed. Right. Or, but some people just want a less messy house. So, and that's both are perfectly great.
And those are both perfectly great. Exactly. And it's really, that's intentional living. Intentional living is being able to take the different concepts and ideas that have worked well for others, that are timeless pieces of wisdom, and then say, how does this apply specifically to me? Because it's just interesting. No matter what I post, somebody will be like, well, I can't because X, Y, and Z. I'm like, well, then this post wasn't for you. I said something, I don't know, about marriage or like working together with your team. Well, my husband does this for work. And so that's, well, then that doesn't apply to you. If that doesn't apply to you, it doesn't apply to you. Intentional living is saying, let me hear what's being said, take good sound advice, and then, like you said, apply it to my life and know that it's not one size fits all. Now, keeping with this idea of integrity, though, because it is important, how do we make sure we are discerning and not just taking any old motivational speech as doctrine in our lives?
So I think if it's a helpful idea to you, if you resonate with it, then it's meaningful. And I don't think motivational speaker people are, if you're going to see a motivational speaker, they're not typically going to be saying anything particularly dangerous from the stage. Again, these are not, it isn't rocket science, but I would say, like, if you find somebody who particularly resonates with you, or their experience is very similar to yours perhaps, or if you find an idea, just really focus on the idea. And
do you think that we should care if so I'm going to use the Mel Robbins experience. You haven't worked with Mel in years, and I'm not saying anything negative about her, neither are you, just for the world to know. But there's a big controversy right now with the fact that she did not come up with the let them theory, and it's been a big issue, right? And so do you think that we should be aware that some people are really in it for the money? Like, she really is trying to make a lot of money off of this phrase that she didn't necessarily come up with, and the money is not going to the original creator. And but yet her book is really, really helpful and really motivating. People really connect with the way she talks and speaks. You've met her. She's a really kind, nice person, very strong, but this is a business to her. She's out here to make money. Yes, I'm sure she cares that she motivates some people, but at the end of the day, she heard a good idea. She took it to make money on it. Do you think that we should give a platform and say, well, it's motivating, so it doesn't really matter if she had integrity while she did it? Or do you think we should do research and know who these people are?
I think, just first of all, I can't speak to the Mel Robbins controversy. I don't know anything about it. I actually would be, I would hesitate to ascribe motivations to anybody that we don't know.
It's a good point.
So I don't want to ascribe any sort of motivations to Mel. She is an incredibly hard worker and has really helped a ton of people. And so I personally am not going to get bogged down in the weeds of where the idea came from. I'm not saying it's not important to
an artist or
to an artist, right? Yeah. Because I used to work with comedians. It's like, obviously
when people steal their jokes,
people stealing materials is like a cardinal sin.
I guess the idea that I'm asking is, like, from your perspective, not on Mel. I obviously brought up a specific one, and whatever. But, like, from your perspective, how do we balance what our intake is from people who are doing something that is a business, even though it feels like it's just, well, I'm just here to help change your life. But they're also there to make money.
Yeah, well, that's all of life. That's literally everything you do. Everybody is, nobody's doing stuff for free.
I mean, excuse me, for the record.
You say that now, and so you're like, hey, check out this next vacuum that I'm selling.
Okay, I do have ads now on the podcast. It's a good point.
Nobody's doing anything for free. Life is a business, and that is okay. That's okay. I mean,
everyone's got to eat.
It was so funny. I had a speaker once come up to me and was like, I just love speaking so much, and I would do this for free. And I was like, fine, I'll bring you an offer for free next time. Will you take it? And they're like, well, no. I was like, exactly. No, it's a business. Of course it's a business. We all have time. We need to get paid for our time. You should get paid for your time. That should be celebrated, not poo-pooed.
But do you think they take advantage of people?
No, the amount of money that they're making is directly proportional to the amount of money the amount of people that they're influencing. So, like, if you're influencing more and more people, you're going to make more and more money. That is okay. I am perfectly comfortable with that.
I love that. No, this is why I wanted to ask you, because you do have a good perspective on that. And I think that people can be really critical of the self-development space, including what I do, right? Like, and I'm critical enough to be like, hey, this is what's going on with the Mel Robbins thing. And I want to follow people with integrity. And also, I think that there is so much criticism of people who are out there making a living, actually trying to help people when it comes to mental roadblocks. Like, it's not a tangible help, right? Like, they're not actually providing a service or a product to a person. But I think that there's a lot of value in people who are out there trying to help someone take agency over their lives, just like I'm doing. I'm out here trying to help you feel more motivated to declutter your home, because I really feel like will help you be happier. And I care, really. I would say, me pretty well. I really genuinely care about other people's well-being and happiness. And this feels like a good fit for me. And so it's actually really nice to ask you, like, hey, is it okay? Even for me, I'm like that. I now do have ads on the podcast, or that people are making money. And it's not just that they're being so generous with their thoughts and motivating people, but they're doing it to make money. And how do you marry those two things? And you're saying that's fine, because
that's literally everything you do. I mean, it's money's just a marker of value, and ideas have value. So why shouldn't somebody get paid for their ideas, especially if they're helpful.
It's a skill to listen to these amazing speakers on stage.
But I think it's unfair to expect people to just give you everything for free. I just think that that's an unfair proposition.
No, I 100% agree. I agree to the point where I did start getting brand deals even for me on Instagram, for example. And I am very mindful about what I will do a brand deal with, because as a decluttering account, I'm not trying to like schlep clutter. You know what I mean? Like that would not work. However, I've had, of course, anytime I do any sort of a brand deal, people get mad. Or as soon as the podcast started having advertisements, people are mad. I'm like, okay, well, there's two ways for me to be able to continue doing this in a way that's, I am going to be able to help support my family rather than going back to a traditional job. Is what I'm offering you worth it to you to sit, and you don't have to pay for anything. You can listen to a free ad, you know, or do you want to directly pay me, right? Like we could do listener supported, but that people aren't as willing to do that. There's an expectation for free information and ideas these days, I think, especially because of social media. And I actually am glad that the speakers that you work with are still getting paid for their ability to communicate and the time and the effort they put into these thoughts. That's a form of creativity, and it's a form of art. I mean, it's not like I don't spend any time on this podcast. I spend a lot of time doing it, and I want it to help other people. But then why is my time is my time not worth anything? That you, like sitting through an ad is going to make you so mad?
Well, technically in this case, my time is technically not worth anything since I'm not getting paid to be here. So in that case, yes, I've just never been one to hate on people for making money. I think I think it's totally fair. Yeah. Go make that bread.
Go make that bread. That's what I said to you earlier today. Well, Jim, I appreciate being able to have such a candid conversation with you, because you're my brother. I can push a little bit. I can be a little bit more myself in the sense that, like, I don't have to be as PC. And even though this is going to still be broadcast to the same number of people, sure, I think that there's a comfortability of being able to like press and really say and push back a little bit more and really try and expand my worldview and understand something that I've always just kind of wondered about. Obviously I'm in the self-help space, and yet I have mixed feelings about the self-help world. And I think that because you're exposed to it regularly from a business perspective, and you know the top game players in this field, it's really nice to hear from you that you don't see it as like an ethical issue.
No, not at all. And in fact, I would say find the people that you love, find the people that inspire you, whose ideas make the most sense for your life. And do not feel bad about supporting them or buying that program or whatever it is, or, you know, going to see them or whatever it might be. You don't need to feel bad about that at all. But the most important thing is that the only value you're going to get out of that is the value that you ultimately end up applying, especially with any kind of in the marketplace of ideas. It really will come down to you.
Yes.
And what's that next right step?
How does that song go?
See, it's such a forgotten song that it's like you can't even begin.
Never change. That's not the right song.
But that's what I mean.
It's the next right thing.
It's it was because it's so sad.
Jim,
and
I'm trying to
dark
sing
and dank. I'm not going to sing it.
You have to.
I'm not going to sing it. So, but that is that. But go listen to it. Go watch Frozen 2.
Okay.
If you make it all the way through the end of the movie, your kids will absolutely walk out of the room during this scene. But I encourage you to stay and watch Anna climb out of that cave.
That is all the motivation you need. Jimbo, thank you. Thank you again so much for coming on. Let's go grab ourselves a glass of Champies. We deserve it. Maybe watch Wicked with the kids. We have to dry them off. I think that they finished their, water balloon fight outside. And I just love you so much. I'm always so blown away by your wisdom, by your willingness to share your perspective, but always in a really mindful way. You don't jump to conclusions. You're very open-minded, and I could not be luckier that you're my brother. And I get you're forced. I always say you're my best friend. I don't think I'm your best friend, but you're my best friend. And so that's like a little bit offensive, but I also, I'm okay with it because I think I love you more than you love me, but that's okay. I'm like the little sister golden retriever energy. And I just think you're the best.
Well, I'm just honored to be a part of this. I have cursed a few times on this. I'm sure she's going to have to edit this out.
Jim, this is not an explicit podcast.
I did not know that curse words were not allowed on this podcast.
Moms listen to this podcast in their car with their kids.
And to all the moms out there, you are listening to one of the best. I have learned so much from Shannon. Shannon, you have deserved every ounce of the success that you have found. Do not listen to those naysayers and just tune them out, because what you're saying is extremely helpful for me. It's helpful for my family. It's helped us rethink how we approach our lives, how we approach our families, how we approach our work. I am so grateful for your influence in my life, and you absolutely are my best friend. So
you said it on air.
It's on air. It's in public.
It's real. I love you so much, truly. Thank you.
You don't have to edit that part out.
And you didn't have to say all that nice stuff. I was just kidding, but it is really nice for you to say it. So, all right, guys, I will be back next week. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you do the next right thing. Bye.
Bye.
You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face. So thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at paring_down, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.